When you think of great stories, you usually think of the stories that have a pleasant and uplifting feeling to them. Yet I would argue that a great story doesn't always have to be pleasant, nor does it have to be uplifting. Rather, I think a great story can also challenge a person and get them to see things in a different way, even if it may seem too dark or too depressing of a subject matter. Today, I want to talk about a film that I would consider to be one of those great stories. I'm of course talking about Grave of the Fireflies, a Studio Ghibli film from 1988 and is directed by the legendary Isao Takahata. So what makes Grave of the Fireflies a great movie, and how is it different from other Studio Ghibli movies? Well, that's what we're going to get into, as today I give you my review of the tragic war story that is Grave of the Fireflies. Grave of the Fireflies takes place during the final months of World War II, in the city of Kobe, Japan, which became one of the select cities that the US went after with its firebomb raids. This of course led to many casualties, and would affect so many people, including our two main characters of the story, Seita and Setsuko, who would go on to lose their mother during this tragic event. Seita and Setsuko would end up living with their aunt, but of course things don't work out the way they had hoped it would, and that's when Seita decides to take it upon himself to care and look after his own sister. It is then that Seita and Setsuko would end up leaving their aunt, only to find themselves struggling to survive as they have nowhere to go, no food, no water, and no means to care for one another. Yet it's throughout the movie that Seita and Setsuko tries to find ways to keep their minds at ease, while war is going on and while innocent lives perish. So Grave of the Fireflies sets a different tone from the other Ghibli movies, in that it depicts a very dark and tragic time for Japan. And the movie uses the two characters of Seita and Setsuko to paint a very broad picture of what it was like to live through all the chaos that was going on. You had people dying, everything was utterly destroyed, as well as having people ultimately suffering and struggling during the aftermath of this great catastrophe. And it's throughout the movie we get to see all this take place and experience it the same way the characters do. Now, there isn't a whole lot of dialogue in this movie, as most of what's going on is shown to us, and this, in my opinion, is what makes Grave of the Fireflies a more emotional and effective movie, as it wants us, the audience, to take in what is actually happening, and it puts us in the characters' perspectives because it wants us to imagine ourselves being thrusted in the same situations that Seita and Setsuko find themselves in. As Grave of the Fireflies is an emotional-driven roller coaster that keeps making twists and turns to the point that it reaches its inevitable conclusion. Yet one of the pivotal moments in the series that I'll always keep in mind is when Setsuko puts a bowl on her head and salutes like a soldier. This symbolism is used to convey to the audience that, much like the Japanese soldiers who are fighting and dying in the war, Setsuko is also a casualty of war. Because during this time, not only were the soldiers putting their lives at stake, but so were the innocent civilians like Seita and Setsuko. And this movie's use of imagery and symbolism are all delicately laid out throughout the entire movie, and it's used in such a staggering yet unique effect that it adds more to the overall lasting impact of the movie. Another example is the Fireflies, which are supposed to symbolize the people who are struggling to stay alive, the ones who are trying to find a light during this truly dark time in Japan's history. Yet much like the Fireflies in the film, many innocent people die, including our main characters Seita and Setsuko, and that's what makes Grave of the Fireflies such a powerful film, as this film literally shows us the cause and effect of war, and how that given situation has an everlasting effect on people. Of course, I should mention the motivation of the characters Seita and Setsuko, who are trying to find peace and comfort. So they play innocently, as you'd expect children to do, despite the movie never distracting from the fact that they know that all of this is going on. Yet it's the motivations of the older brother, Seita, that truly sets this film. Seita does have a purpose and goal, and that is ensuring the care and well-being of his 4-year-old sister, Setsuko. It is throughout the movie that we see Seita do everything he can to take care of his sister and keep her mind at ease during this time of war. However, when Setsuko finds out the truth about their mother, Seita breaks down and cries for the very first time in the movie. This is a pivotal moment for Seita because this is when he realizes that he made the wrong choices, and that he knows that at this point, there is no way he can take care of his sister because he couldn't even keep her mind at ease over the fact that their mother had died. And this brings me back to Seita's choices, as they are what defines his character. Seita is a stubborn teenager who didn't take things for granted, he didn't respect what his aunt or others did for him, and it's because of his rebellious nature and the poor decisions that ultimately led to his sister's untimely death, which then led to his tragic death. However, while Seita is a tragically flawed character, in many ways I can understand why he was the way he was, because it's the very nature of war that screws all rational thinking. I couldn't even begin to imagine living and having to accept the situation, knowing my mother was dead, knowing that my sister was the only one I had left. Taking those things into account, it's easy to understand Seita and the other characters' motivations, because they had to endure everything that was going on, and that to me is what makes this movie so compelling and emotional. In terms of animation, it's everything you'd come to expect from a Studio Ghibli film, from the iconic character designs to the great amount of detail put into the scenery. It amazes me that even after 30 years, this movie still manages to look this good, retains its quality, and stands amongst even modern animated films. However, unlike most Ghibli movies that mostly have a surreal feeling to them, while Grave of the Fireflies does have some surrealism in it, yet it's the overall dark tone and morbid depiction of what Japan was like during the war that gives off this feeling of discomfort and dread. And this is a natural reaction to have, especially given the fact that this is something that actually happened in world history. It's something I like to call life imitating art, and that is what sets Grave of the Fireflies from other Studio Ghibli films. Now let's talk about the music, which was composed by Michio Mamiya. And it's amazing how each track manages to set the tone for each scene effectively. The music can best be described as extremely subtle and beautiful. There are some tracks that sound melancholic, which are effective in the sad and emotional scenes. And of course you have some cheerful music playing, like during the scene with Seita and Setsuko playing on the beach. My only complaint with the music is the fact that the actual soundtrack to Grave of the Fireflies includes the Japanese voice actors speaking while the music is playing. I mean, come on, why couldn't you have just given us the music for the soundtrack? If I wanted to listen to the Japanese voice actors, I'd just play the movie. Then you have the English dubs, and yes, there is 2 English dubs for Grave of the Fireflies. You have the Central Park Media dub, which has J. Robert Spencer as Seita and Corinne Orr as Setsuko. And while I wouldn't say it's a terrible dub, I will say that it doesn't meet the same high standard you'd expect from a dub for a Ghibli movie. Now, the Central Park Media dub does try to stay close to the original script, yet for some reason I can't help but think that the dialogue just seems a bit off. and it doesn't help that when you listen to the lines being delivered, most of them come off as sounding stale and unnatural. Just listen to this little nugget.
How bad?
My mom died while she was still at the school.
What? She's dead? Then why didn't you tell me? Why were you hiding it?
Yeah, that was pretty bad, but I will say that the dub does have some good things going for it, like Crispin Freeman voicing the old man, yet this was back in 1998 and nobody knew who Crispin Freeman was, which is a shocker, I know, but it is what it is. Now, I would probably forgive this dub if it wasn't a Ghibli production, but no, I can't find myself recommending this dub to anybody. So there's that. As for the other English dub, which was dubbed by Sentai Filmworks, you have Adam Gibbs voicing Seita and Emily Neves voicing Setsuko. And I gotta say that the dub is actually really good for the most part. While it's certainly not Disney quality work we're getting here, yet I will say this one trumps over the Central Park Media dub. The dialogue was a lot better and it was written competently, even though there was some changes made to it, but those are kinda minor in this case. But the best part is I didn't notice any awkward line reads or stale deliveries in this dub, which is a good thing because that means I can recommend you to watch this dub. However, there is one problem that I do have with this dub, and that is of course the casting choice for Setsuko. And while I do like Emily Neves, and yes, she is a great voice actress, however, all that aside, I don't feel she does justice for Setsuko. Setsuko is supposed to be a 4-year-old girl, yet her voice in this sounds like a middle-aged woman trying to sound like a 4-year-old girl. I could understand them not getting a child voice actress for this, yet I honestly would have preferred it because at least Setsuko would have sounded like a child and not someone pretending to sound like a child. Everyone else was alright, and I will say that this dub is actually worth listening to if you really can't watch the Japanese version. Yet honestly, I think the Japanese version is the best way to watch this movie, mostly because of the fact that the voice actors in it sound really good and they provide the strongest emotional impact in their performance, which is especially impressive given the fact that much of the cast came from backgrounds outside of anime. Now, in terms of Ghibli movies, I would consider Grave of the Fireflies as one of their best works, and it's definitely a film that everyone needs to watch. Now, I've heard over the years that Grave of the Fireflies is nothing more than a sad movie because the characters die and the movie tries to manipulate you with its message, which I think is an overstatement that someone made up because they can't handle the fact that this movie is trying to tell you a compelling story and it wants you to contemplate on what's actually happening. And while the original story does have some slight alterations to it, it's the setting and key events that haven't been altered in any way. The bombings in Kobe actually happened. People actually died during this, and much like the characters of Seita and Setsuko, people actually had to suffer from the aftermath. The movie isn't trying to manipulate you, rather it's putting you in the shoes of the characters, and it's trying to get you to understand what it was like to live in this, and why the characters made the choices that they made. It's effective storytelling because it's trying to get you to consider things that you normally wouldn't consider, and that's what makes this movie different from other sad war movies. And that's what makes Grave of the Fireflies so compelling and thought-provoking. But nevertheless, just go watch Grave of the Fireflies, as it's a film that I would consider to be a masterpiece and worthy of its legacy. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed this review of Grave of the Fireflies. If you liked this video and want to see me upload more content like this, then be sure to subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to click on that bell icon to be notified when my videos go up. Also be sure to follow me on my social media to keep up with me, and if you want to interact with me even more, then be sure to join me on my Discord server. Link is in the description. Also, if you want to support the channel, then consider donating to my Patreon page, even if it's just $1 a month. I would gladly appreciate it. But if you don't want to consider donating yet still want to support me, then just share my videos wherever you can, as it would surely mean a lot to me. But nevertheless, this has been Hyrule, and you all have a fantastic day. Stay awesome.